I'm going to be presenting my job market paper titled Party Affiliation of Governors and Internal Migration of Low-Skilled Immigrants, Evidence from the U.S. States. Maybe I can dive into the research question right away for the sake of time. I'm interested in whether the political shocks affect the interstate migration flows of low-skilled immigrants in the U.S., especially Hispanic individuals. And I'm trying to rephrase and a bit more nail it down the research question into the following. Would low-skilled immigrants prefer to live in the democratic states? And to answer that, I think it is important to think about the partisan differences that generate diverging migration incentives. And there are many differences spanning from stance on migration, economic policies, non-economic topics, and more across the two big parties, the Republican parties and Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party has a pro-migration stance, and it is well known. And also, Republican Party is well known for its restrictive immigration stance. And this is true for national level, but also true for state level as well, as supported by the literature. Republican states are more likely to sign the policies like E-Verify and 2A7G, which are the ones that enhances the overall collaboration between federal and state governments in migration enforcement. In economic policies, Democratic Party defines itself as party for low-income earners and minorities. Also, in non-economic topics, the Democratic Party has a stance that embraces individuals from diverse backgrounds. Also, the big sword literature from the political science as narrative to this context by reporting empirical evidence about geographic sorting by partisanship. And indeed, there is prevailed understanding and common kind of stylized fact in U.S. politics that immigrants, Hispanics define themselves as Democrats, and there is strong connection between immigrants and Hispanics and the Democratic Party, which could be also pronounced among many surveys and polls, including this one by Pew Research Center. And immigrants or foreign-born population, a significant portion of them define themselves as Democrats or lean to Democrats. And this could be also true for Hispanics when I divide people by racial and ethnic divisions. A very significant share of them defines themselves Democrats or lean to Democrats. Furthermore, Hispanics and Latinos think that it is Democratic Party that really works hard to earn their votes and represents their incentives. And keeping those all in mind, maybe we can move on to the drivers of internal migration. I think researchers has pretty much made a good attempts to identify drivers of migration, both internal and external, international. And in this regard, political shocks are very important because they generate both economic and non-economic variations that all matter to migration decisions. And the overall effect of that could be ambiguous because first, simply, there has been no one who closely looked at it in the US context yet. And second, there could be some incentives that could attract people and some incentives could repel people. So whole combined overall effect could be more like empirical questions that should be answered. However, the US literature has mainly focused on economic shocks, leaving political shocks unexplored. And as for the role of internal migration, it is known that geographic mobility within a country plays a significant role in elevating the labor demand shock and enhancing the overall efficiency of the economy. And in this regard, foreign-born population is an important key group because of their significant geographic mobility, which is also very pronounced and more substantial than natives, especially among low-skilled ones when they react to economic incentives. Answering to my simple research question could be not that easy and simple because politics is endogenous. Political and electoral outcomes generate various changes in diverse dimensions, economic, non-economic, and even demographic changes. And all of these in turn form electoral outcomes as well. So to deal with potential indigeneity problem, I employ regression discontinuity design to answer that by focusing on the close election of democratic governors with a small vote share margin of victory in the US gubernatorial election outcomes across 50 states from 2000 to 2019. So here, I leverage the situation like a coin toss, which could be as good as random. And I leverage the US political system that grants significant authority to governors to set state-level policies, budgets, and more. I also leverage the situation where there is significant partisan differences in policies and outcomes across states following their partisanship of governors, which is also supported and investigated by the literature. And as we briefly checked in the slides, and maybe many of you will be well known about the overall stylized effect in US politics. We know that there is pro-migration stance in the Democratic Party, and there is strong connection between the party and immigrant Hispanic population. And overall political and policy incentives could be made to be more favorable to immigrant and Hispanic population to live in the Democratic states. However, what I found in the data is quite counterintuitive to this common understanding of US politics. I find a close election of Democratic governors has its overall effect on interstate migration flows in a way to decrease the net flows of low-skilled immigrants due to lower inflows and higher outflows. And this pattern is mainly driven by Hispanic immigrants, and the low-skilled Hispanic immigrants with his high school diploma decreased almost by 19% or so, while I find higher net flows among low-skilled white natives, I here mean by US-borns, geared by higher inflows and lower outflows, which leads to some increase in the population. So we've just checked that there is diverging migration patterns across immigrants and natives, and the relative magnitude of the change in migration responses is more pronounced among immigrants. Also, we've briefly checked that the literature says that low-skilled immigrants are more mobile when they react to economic opportunities. So we're going to get back to that point by digging out a possible and a decisive channel that I'm proposing, which would be the economic changes formed by this political shock. And indeed, I checked the diverging economic policy outcomes and economic performance outcomes, where I first focused on there is about 2.8% higher real state minimum wages under Democratic governors. And in blue states, the governors are more likely and more frequently to change the minimum wage during their term. And I also find about 2 percentage points higher state earned income tax credit rates. Based on these two, the key economic policy differences and potentially related to the job reducing effect of minimum wage increase, I find higher unemployment rates for low-skilled Hispanic immigrants, while I find lower unemployment rates for low-skilled white natives. So we've just checked the divergent migration responses, different labor market policies, and different labor market outcomes. To understand all of these and embrace all of them in one line, I tried to propose a simple mechanism that is in line with theoretical and empirical findings in the literature. And in this simple framework, imperfect substitution between immigrants and natives in the labor market plays a significant role. Maybe we could start from the demand side. Higher minimum wage could indicate higher marginal cost of labor. And facing that, employers may favor more productive workers than less productive ones. Native workers in my context they could be perceived as more productive than immigrants because of their US labor market specific skill sets, such as language proficiency. On supply side, higher minimum wage and higher EITC rates combined could lift up the effective wage level, maybe above the reservation wages of high productive types. And that could it be enough to induce their labor supply to the jobs that used to be filled by less productive types. Therefore, low-skilled immigrants could face stronger competition in the labor market, which could lower the probability of getting a job. And in turn, they could face lower expected payoffs in the labor market, while the opposite happens to their native counterparts. Following the findings in the literature, they may choose to work in a different state because of their more significant mobility when they react to economic opportunities. So the slide until now as a quick important summary, key points about my job market paper. And from the next slide, maybe we can talk about a bit more details. But for the sake of time, maybe I can skip some slides like this, literature reviews. And if time permits, we can come back and talk about it in more detail when we open the floor as well. But for now, maybe I can talk about the data I measure by saying that I'm going to be using American Community Survey data from 2000 to 2019 to build up the annual interstate migration flows using the individuals who answered that they were living in a different state 1 year ago. Not in group quarters, not in school, working aged. I use those to define the net flows into state I in time t by using the individuals moved into state I in time t, which will be the inflows, minus the outflows, divided by the total state working age population in the pre-treatment year, which will be the election year, EIT. And the forcing variable of my RDD, which will be explained in a bit, the running variable will be exactly the same across the years within a mandate or term. So the causal effect that I'm estimating would be the average yearly effect during the full term of a governor, which will be typically 4 years. And talking of my forcing variable, this will be coming from the Dave Lape's Atlas data. And I defined the Democratic Party's vote share margin of victory as the percent difference of votes casted by the winner and the second place. And I focus only the elections, either Democrats or Republican wins. So we're going to take positive value when Democrat wins and negative when they loses. This table will be the first one that I would like to share today for descriptive statistics section. And this summarizes the net flows, the mean and standard deviation of net flows in the first year of a governor term within a small bandwidth. And here, the first and second column shows the mean and standard deviation of net flows in the first year to the left and to the right of the cutoff, red and blue states. And third column shows the difference between the two. And what I want to highlight in this table is that from immigrants, low-skilled immigrants, and low-skilled Hispanic immigrants, they show lower net flows in Democratic states, while low-skilled white natives show higher net flows in Democratic states. I should admit that this is just a descriptive statistics, but those pattern is also supported by more rigorous RDD estimates that I'm going to be sharing in a bit. But before we touch it, maybe we can touch some more facets of state level information. So this table is summarizing the mean share of this key subpopulation in the pre-treatment year, which is the election year, within, once again, small bandwidth. And here, what I want to highlight in this table is the last 3 columns, which summarizes the balanced covariate test results. And here, I do not see any significant evidence of discontinuity at the cutoff across these mean share of the key subpopulation, which indicates those very important informations are not predetermined and not predetermining the overall effects that I am capturing. And this also indirectly indicates that the control and treatment group are quite homogeneous in this respect, so that they are really okay range to compare to get the causal effect that I am focusing on. And this is also true for other phases, including economic performance and political composition and state level. And once again, I do not see any significant evidence of discontinuity at the cutoff for these. And maybe I can talk about the identification strategy that I employed to deal with potential endogeneity problem. The main identification strategy that I'm using is a covariate adjusted, local, linear, weighted regression approach of RDD. And I here mean by local by using a small bandwidth of running variable here, which will be h over the marginal victory. And my regression function is linear, as I am using a first order polynomial of running variable, which will be controlled to the left and to the right hand side of the cutoff, respectively. And here, this dem1 indicator will take a value of 1 if a Democrat candidate wins. So this tau over here will be the main parameter of interest to capture the discontinuity. And talking of covariate adjusted, my main specification will be parsimonious with only 3 fixed effects in my covariate vector, where I have state fixed effects, election year fixed effects, and whether these gubernatorial elections are held in the years that presidential elections were held, to take into account very important source of variation in US politics. Talking of weighted, I'm employing triangular kernel weight to pose higher weights on the observations that are more closer to the cutoff. And standard errors are clustered by state. I'm not sure if we have more time to really closely look at the overall the slides on this section though, but I'd like to highlight that even with additional identification strategy, I have consistent results, and those additional identification strategies take into account within state variations. What does within state variation mean in my context? Someone could think that, oh, I get that, but it could be possible that the flip or switch of partisanship within a state could be kind of more decisive changes in overall policy directions so that migration incentive changes. So I get that, and I try to employ or implement 2 different approaches. The first one is extension of my RDD estimator into a more like a definitive style by restricting the RDD sample to the observations that had the Republican governors in the prior term. Then in the second term, the very next term, we're going to have Republican to Republican and Republican to Democrat cases. Then if I do the same thing for the RDD for the second term, I'm going to be capturing more exogenous variation through the RDD with this restricted sample, which resembles more definitive style. And once again, I find consistent results from this approach. And the second one, I employ the definitive estimator that accounts for the staggered adoption of reversible treatment. Once again, I define here in this context that the flip from Republicans to Democrats within a state as a treatment, and this could be happening in different states in different timing, which has a staggered adoption property, and this could be also reversed. So that's why I am employing the estimator of Duchesse-Martin and Dautefeuille's 2020 paper. And once again, I find consistent results from these approaches as well. We're going to get back to this one if time permits later, if we open the floor. But I think it is the right timing for us to take a look at a graphical evidence where the four figures summarizes the net flows, and the right-hand side of the cutoff are the observations in democratic states, and the left-hand side are red states. And the upper panel is summarizing what I found from low-skilled immigrants. And I see that when they have democratic governors by small margin, they show lower net flows, while in the lower panel, low-skilled white natives show higher net flows when they have democratic governors by small margin. And this pattern is also supported by more rigorous RDD estimates that I summarized over here. And once again, from immigrants, low-skilled immigrants, and low-skilled Hispanic immigrants, I find lower net flows when they have democratic governors, while I find higher net flows among low-skilled white natives. So we've just checked divergent migration responses from net flows. And then it could be quite interesting if we can decompose the net flows into inflows and outflows to see what is going on in my data. And this could be done by this table. And once again, immigrants, low-skilled immigrants, and low-skilled Hispanic immigrants show lower net flows geared by lower inflows and higher outflows. On the other hand, low-skilled white natives show higher net flows due to higher inflows and lower outflows. And it is also important to think about economic significance and using the mean share of the key subpopulation that I showed earlier in the election year, and using these estimates that I have right here, I tried to compute some sort of relative magnitude of the change during a full term of democratic governors, which could be typically 4 years. So talking of the low-skilled Hispanic immigrant without high school diploma, I expect about 5.4% decrease in the population during the full term of a Democratic governor, and about 19% decrease for the population with high school diploma. While I expect some increase in low-skilled white natives, about 4.1% and about 1.1% respectively. So we've just checked that there is diverging migration pattern across immigrants and natives among low-skilled ones. And the relative magnitude of change is more pronounced among low-skilled immigrants.
Sorry, Juno, can I clarify one thing here?
Mm-hmm.
Just to understand. So the fact that you have a coefficient in the first row of like 0.09, which is larger than coefficients below, right? So I'm just curious, does it mean that for high-skilled immigrants, the effect is even stronger? Or am I reading it wrong? So I was not sure when I was reading the paper. So how do we compare the coefficients in the, let's say, in the first row and the second row?
This one and this one?
Yeah, something like that.
I see. Like I said, the overall flows are the net flows divided by the total state working age population, and that's why I have the flows are in the fractions. And for immigrants, the change in net flow is minus 0.091 percentage point, while this low-skilled ones have 0.024 percentage point decrease when they have Democratic governors compared to the case of Republican governors within the same 5 percentage point. And the magnitude of the coefficients are mainly driven by the size of each subpopulation. That's why I computed the relative magnitude of the change within each subpopulations. And it could be kind of confusing that when we see this minus 0.025 and 0.051, because it seems that the magnitude per se, the absolute value could be bigger for low-skilled white natives. But it is because the size of this population is quite bigger over here. And that's why I tried to make the relative magnitude of the change to see which subpopulation show kind of more pronounced reaction to this political shock. So did I answer it clearly?
Sorry, yeah, continue, yes.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. Yeah, once again, I made 2 points, and the literature once again reported that low-skilled immigrants are more mobile when they react to economic opportunities. So these 3 points, I'm gonna be back after talking this slide really briefly. And actually, this slide summarizes my quite attempts to see whether my research design is valid, whether my main results are robust in various angles as well, even including the additional identification strategies right here. So I'm planning to share this one and even this one if time permits after that. But for the sake of the main flow of the presentation, maybe I can just move on to the next slide and come back to this one. Talking of the 3 points that I just made. Diverging migration responses, more pronounced relative reaction from immigrants. Low-skilled immigrants are more reactive to economic incentives. So I thought that it is quite reasonable to think about economic outcomes and policies formed by this political shock as a decisive and a conceivable channels to explore. So in terms of economic outcomes, I think blue states, the democratic states, are performing quite well. But what I want to highlight in this table is economic policy. I find partisan differences over economic policies, such as 2.8% higher real state minimum wages in blue states, and the democratic governors are more likely and more frequently to change the minimum wage during their term. Also, I find about 2 percentage point higher state earned income tax credit rates under democratic governors. And I think, once again, this partisan differences over economic policies formed by this political shock could be a interesting channel to follow up. Then a subsequent question, really subsequent question could be like that. Oh, is minimum wage increase could be binding to the two key groups that I'm talking about? A quick answer to that could be yes. If we take a look at a CDF of wage minus min wage distribution for these two groups. So in the left-hand side, I summarized CDF for low-skilled Hispanic immigrants, and the other side, we have low-skilled white natives. And there are some things that I can see from these two CDFs. The first, I see a very significant share of population, the two key groups, are paid around the minimum wages. And the second thing is a very significant share of population is paid below the minimum wages. Say here is about 25% and 20%, and about 5 percentage point lower respectively, but still really significant share of population are paid lower than minimum wages. And third, I see really significant share of population are paid just above the minimum wage, which could be the people who are already competing with low-skilled white natives in the labor market. And fourth, I'm talking about the minimum wage increase, which could indicate the shift of this red vertical line to the right, which could make it more substantial share of population could be under this effect. So from those points, I would like to say that the minimum wage increase could be kind of more binding and have some bite to these two key groups that I'm talking about. I'm not saying that this could be the whole like channels that could absorb all of these, but this could be a decisive channel. So coming back to the mainstream, also I checked about the labor market outcomes as well, and potentially related to the job reducing effect of minimum wage increase. I find higher unemployment rates for low-skilled Hispanic immigrants when they have democratic governors by small margin, while I find lower unemployment rates from low-skilled white natives. And this unemployment rate effects could be robust to very different angles, including various angles with like big sections right here. But maybe I can briefly talk about the last section for the sake of time. I tried an exercise to see if minimum wage could be a key channel to have this divergent labor market outcomes as well. So one exercise that I did is decomposing the samples to the ones that did not have minimum wage change during the term. And the other one is the minimum wage change happened during their term. I compared the two. And when we compare the two, I also find that unemployment rate of low-skilled Hispanic immigrants is rising, while the low-skilled white natives show lower unemployment rates. So maybe I can click this one. The first 6 columns about the sample without any minimum wage change during the term, and the latter 6 columns about there's change in the minimum wage. What I want to do is for low-skilled Hispanic immigrants, when we compare to those to right-hand side section, I have higher unemployment rates is more vividly pronounced, while the low-skilled white natives show lower unemployment rates when there is minimum wage increase. So this could be some sort of indirect exercise that resembles the interaction term exercise within RDD setting. I think I have only 8 minutes or so, right?
Yes.
So as a quick recap of what I just showed, low-skilled Hispanic immigrants in the labor market faced a lower probability of getting a job, which could in turn lead to lower expected payoffs in the labor market, while the opposite happens to their low-skilled white native counterparts. And to understand all of these divergent migration patterns, different labor market policies across partisanship, different labor market outcomes, I would like to bring the imperfect substitution between low-skilled immigrants and natives as an important building block to understand what is going on in my data. So like I just said, to understand divergent migration patterns, labor market policies, labor market outcomes, I'm proposing a simple framework that is consistent with the theoretical and empirical findings in the literature. And in this mechanism, once again, imperfect substitution plays a significant role. And once again, starting from demand side, higher minimum wage could indicate higher marginal cost of labor. And facing that, employers may favor more productive workers than less productive ones. And also native workers in my context, they can be perceived as more productive than immigrants because of their US-specific labor market skill sets, such as language proficiency. When it comes to supply side, higher minimum wage and higher EITC rate could enhance or increase or lift up the effective wage level, which could be enough to induce the labor supply of high productive types, as indicated in this graph. For this graph summarizes the labor supply schedule of high productive types with higher reservation wage. And based on the usual wage schedule, it could be not enough to induce their labor supply due to higher reservation wages. And higher EITC rates alone or higher minimum wage alone could not be that enough to induce their labor supply. But higher EITC rates and higher minimum wage combined could enough to induce their labor supply to the jobs that used to be filled by less productive ones. Therefore, the low-skilled immigrants could be facing stronger competition in the labor market, which could lower the probability of getting a job and lower probability of lower expected payoffs in the labor market, while the opposite happens to the native counterparts. And once again, leveraging the findings in the literature, low-skilled immigrants are more mobile to seek economic opportunities. They could choose to work in a different state. And here, I'd like to interpret this as partisan differences prompted by this political shock, especially in the policy part, could repel low-skilled immigrants and attract low-skilled white natives. And there are so many side tables and many subgroup analysis and other subsequent analysis that could support what I'm just saying. As you can check out my draft, and but for the sake of time, maybe I can summarize right here that I'm interested in political shocks as drivers of internal migration in US context, which has not been explored yet until now. And once again, despite there's a common understanding of US politics, there is close connection between Democratic Party and immigrants and Hispanics, and also there could be favorable incentives over there. What I found in the data is that close election of Democratic governors has its over effect that lowers net flows of low-skilled immigrants, and there is a higher net flows among low-skilled white natives. And for the attempt to seek the possible mechanism to explain it, I focused on economic variations prompted by this political shock, where I mainly stem on the higher real estate minimum wage under Democratic governors. And I bring imperfect substitution between immigrants and natives to build up this simple framework to understand what is going on with my divergent migration patterns, labor market policies, and labor market outcomes. So I think these are the main stream of the presentation that I prepared for today. And it will be really welcomed if I can get some feedbacks or questions, or even if I can get some minutes to share some interesting phases of some analysis that I made. But before that, I would like to once again appreciate for your precious time to come over and hear my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Juno. Maybe, I suggest we let Alexander discuss the paper, and then if you have time and if you want to react to his discussion, then you'll get a couple of minutes to react. So Alex, I'll let you share your slides for discussion. You'll have about 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll open the floor to discussion for the rest of participants. Thank you.
All right, you can see the slides?
Yes, perfect.
All right, great. So thanks a lot, Juno. That was very interesting, and I enjoyed reading the paper. I think it's, as all our papers, suffering a little bit from the increasing demands to the robustness checks, but that's not our fault, so I totally understand. The only thing about the paper that I would suggest is maybe putting some of the main graphs to the main part of the paper. It just I think it just eases the flow to read, but overall I enjoyed a lot.
I appreciate it.
Now, I think it's a great paper overall. As I said, it tackles an important question indeed, which was indeed not very much addressed, these sort of political shocks and how they affect migration. There are actually a few papers in Europe, I think, for example, recently by Frédéric Dauquier and the team. So that's something to look at, but you probably know. And I think the empirical strategy is also very, very nice. So overall, I was happy to read the paper. For me, I think it's very surprising and an interesting effect indeed that this election of democratic leaders decreases net immigration of lower skilled immigrants. That's very interesting, I think. The opposite effects for low-skilled natives are also quite significant, so that's a lot. And there could be, of course, tons of various mechanisms to explore. I will suggest a few more, but I mean, there is always an additional channel to test. So, okay. How to advance the paper? I mean, it's very thoroughly done already, so it's mostly suggestions, but yeah, if you have time and if you want, you can try some of these things. Basically, 3 directions: empirical approach, mechanisms, and maybe ways to expand the contribution potentially. So first, regarding the empirical strategy, I think you can comment more on the slopes in your regression discontinuity graphs on the left of the cutoff. They were quite quite sharp, I think, increasing towards the cutoff on the Republican side. So that would be interesting to understand what is the dynamics with this running variable, okay, just to make people more convinced. Then I'm curious what happens to the sample of immigrants generally who stay in the US. And I'm curious whether internal migration versus international migration, what is the stronger reply basically to political shocks? And basically, if international migration is an important reply, then how does it affect your sample in a way? Those who consider internal migration who have not yet left. Okay, so I don't think it was discussed a lot. So maybe at least acknowledging these various opportunities that migrants have would be good. Then I think the overall RDD is quite good, of course, for the identification. You have these local effects, right? But I'm also curious, how does it compare to non-local effects in a way? So maybe running like a simpler, different D for event study would be good, even not restricting to, like narrow windows and stuff like that, just to see if there is any specificity to your regression discontinuity results. And if there are any, so what are they driven by? Is it selection into what kind of governors are elected or what? So it could be interesting to compare, because maybe the aggregate effects are even larger, or maybe they are null. Okay, so that would be interesting to understand how your local effects compare to the broader ones. Okay, and importantly, I would also love to see how the effects unfold over time. Okay, so including this kind of several years post-election. And this is basically brings me to my next point about the mechanism, which is basically what is the role of expectations versus actual policies. Okay, so because like, how fast do these migration responses happen? Okay, if this happens immediately after election, then maybe I would say it's just that people expect the governors to do something, and so they kind of flee, fearing maybe some of these minimum wage effects, or I don't know, something like that, right? But then how fast also do the governors react with their policies, right? So is it an immediate effect? I mean, maybe, but maybe, it takes a few years, okay, for these policies to take place. And then I guess we would also expect the migration response to happen not immediately, right? So, I mean, and generally, I mean, how long does it take to plan, for even, across state relocation? Probably it's not a matter of a couple of weeks, right? So there's that, okay? So maybe some sort of like time graphs with like event study, like is it the effect kick in immediately or like a few years after? Does it like evaporate after a couple of years or what? So these sort of things. Then you mentioned some industry level things at the end. I think it would be cool to see more, especially when you mention this kind of native specific skills, like linguistic skills, for example. In principle, some of the papers by like Perry and Sparber, for example, I think they do some sort of analysis at the industry level, decomposing industries into like, more language intense, less language intense. Maybe you can try something like that, to prove some of your mechanisms. Then I was also curious, where do people go and where they come from? And in this context, like imagine the situation where, I mean, you discussed this also a little bit, but imagine the situation where there was a democratic leader and the democratic leader is retained, okay? And in the nearby state, there was a Republican leader and now there is a democratic leader. So in a way, even though if your state kind of in your situation will be on the right of the RDD plot, right? So it kind of retains the democratic leader, maybe the nearby state got relatively more attractive, in a way. So I'm curious whether there is some sort of like bilateral effects between states, basically. But that's, I guess, an extension broadly. And yeah, finally, for the mechanisms, maybe you could look at, what is like the identity of the elected representative. I suspect that the majority would be white. I suspect, I don't know, probably so. There is still like a selection into politics effects, and most of them would be white, I guess. So yeah, and then basically, if the white representative is kind of closer, quote unquote, to the white potential migrants, then maybe it can explain part of your story. Okay. Yeah, and then this is purely speculative, okay? Although the first part is not, I think you would benefit from showing the effects for the high-skilled as well, just to see how the two things compare, basically. And then maybe there is a broader paper to be written here in a way, because we know this recent evidence from like Amerigitin and Piketty showing that educational stance, like let's say 30, 40 years ago, and today has a very different effect on politics, basically, on left-right, Democratic, Republican voting. And so maybe this kind of, there is like a story to be told about how your education, how your skill level, how it affects your migration responses to these political shocks. Maybe like back in the day, the response was different, which basically leads me to the second point. I think there is data to go further back in time, in a way. Because you have, I mean, the American Community Survey, I think it's more recent, right? But with the census data, for example, maybe you can go further back in time. Maybe that's a different paper already. Probably it is a different paper, but since you already invested a lot of time, I think it's like basically as we speak almost, you can check this sort of things, right? So, and then historically, there were many interesting changes, right? So party positions changed quite a bit. Salient issues changed quite a bit. Let's say, I don't know, LGBT issues were getting more and more prevalent over the last 30 years, but not before. So basically, I'm curious how migration responses changed as basically party platforms and salient issues were evolving. Okay, so yeah, but that's it. I think overall that's a very interesting paper, and yeah, congrats.
Thank you so much, Alexander.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to reply some of them, or like?
Of course, you can choose a couple of points, and if other participants have questions, they can raise their hand and I'll unmute them after you answer to a few points.
I will also send you the slides, by the way, so just so you have it later on. So it's
awesome. Actually, I was about to ask for the Alexander, because like I feel that after even after my job market, I feel your comments and questions are well beyond and really brilliant than the set of the questions and comments that I got in my job market. So I once again appreciate your precious comments and questions, and also your precious time. And maybe
You're
I
welcome.
can retouch some of the points, because there are like tons of very interesting points, like maybe some selective ones. What made RDD more special? Then I would say that unexpectedness or randomness could be more decisive. It was kind of feeling bad that I did not have much time to share whole the screen about the additional identification strategy that even encompassed the definitive estimator. But overall, definitive RDD and definitive style had a consistent results that I showed. And as Alexander knows my paper, we're gonna talk about it in later as well. But even with the event study style that I did not show in earlier today, or even in usual definitive setting, the main point of my paper is robust. And also, the reason why I want to focus on RDD and even more smaller set of bandwidth is to get some sort of more homogeneous control and treatment variable, except for treatment assignments being having a Democrat governor by small margin. So that is just one point of the very important point of employing that as main strategies. And I do have definitely event study years as well. But one tricky thing about my setting is that we could decompose it by 4 years and typically, because of the nature of continuing election outcomes, which could be flipped or changed even within a party. We have to admit that there is heterogeneity across representatives within same partisanship as well. So the overall nature of my data should be decomposed by 4 years. And
but can you not look at, like, let's say there is an election in 2000, what was that, 2022, let's say the last one, if you had the data, of course, or that would be like 2018, okay, 2018. Can you see, is it a migration in 2019, 2020, 2021?
Yes,
How
yes.
many years after election do your effects kick in? Can you check that, or is it?
Yes, yes, that is a really important question, and many people also asking my job market period as well. Talking of the 40 years, I was quite surprised that the migration reaction as well as the policy reaction happened in earlier term of a governor. If we think about 4 years, the first 2 years are the main years that governors had a minimum wage increase, if there is any. And as we know, the migration decision per se happens takes some time, and nobody will gonna migration at a time. But still, the first 2 years could be very important year in terms of migration responses, and that lasts until the end of the migration. I mean, until the end of a mandate, I should say. So, because of the small sample and because I am decomposing it by year and year, the overall confidence interval sometimes could be covering the 0 point, but overall direction of the estimates is also consistent with my main points that I showed today. And I think it is really very important and interesting comments that you raised, and also other people also raised in my job market era as well. What will be the what if I can use the bilateral migration flows, which will be the very next project that I have in my future research pipeline. First of all, I do admit that knowing about who is moving from where to where is very important and interesting. And I think using this bilateral movements and flows and using some sort of gravity model channel to think about the discrete choice model, following the McFadden's approach and according to literatures will be very interesting, because using that, I can control for the characteristics from the origin, characteristics from the destination, and combine of that at the same time and show kind of a bit more broader picture in that context. So admitting that and given saying that, the reason why I first decompose into or kind of collapsing into in stata terms, collapsing into more kind of unilateral flow is to show that, what is the basic, the simplest version of this migration pattern according to be more easier to see the overall picture and compare with other papers in the literature. As Alexander knows, there are some few papers concerning about the political shocks and internal migration, including the Italy cases. Say there is the cases of Lega Nord cases as well. Bracco et al. And other wonderful researchers made such kind of contribution over there. So that's why I first focused on that, and definitely those are the next section as well. And talking of the elected representatives, like race, ethnic, and origin, or things, I think there is really brilliant, because it is more likely to lean to Democratic Party for the kind of colored representatives to be made. But we should also think about, even with the white and kind of really American representatives are also can be a Democratic Party candidates and really radical migration guys. So we that is the definitely thing that we can think about. Maybe I'm a bit worried about the smaller sample size though, but I can do it definitely. And I really appreciate that you talked about Gethin et al. About the educational realignment as well. I'm gonna definitely check that as well. And talking of the high school, I'm high skill. I'm sorry, I should say high skill. Actually, it's kind of side note though. But when I just do this research, I was kind of shocked that I find a working paper by Professor Mitch Doney in Stockholm University. He was focusing on high skill only. And at the time, I embraced the whole of the people, like spanning from low skilled and high skilled, all divided by the nativity and races as well. So I was quite shocked. Then like, should I do the 7th year or something? I cannot go into the job market right now. But it was quite interesting to see his paper. His results was about high skilled ones. Mainly the native ones are more likely to locate in the Democratic Party, which is mainly explained by their ideological alliance. not by any kind of economic channels prompted by this political shock. But here, for me, low-skilled immigrants, as you pointed out, I proposed some very interesting and counterintuitive data analysis and proposed my best shot about the mechanisms. And it is it will be very interesting to think about the low-skilled and high-skilled and those kind of skill complementarity as well in the whole kind of bigger picture of labor market and general equilibrium setting. And that will be definitely the kind of bigger project and later though. But like I'm just saying that there is a paper, working paper over there as well. Yeah, I think I talked too much, right? I see some chats over there. Oh yeah, she has to go. And is there any Q&As that I did not see in
No, for
the...
now, no. But if any of the panelists or participants has a question, then the floor is yours. So don't hesitate to raise your hand. Let's see if we have any questions.
In the meantime, I will just briefly ask, do you think it's possible at all that you can say something about whether Democratic Party actually delivers on the promise or something like that? In a sense that, I mean, it might just make a paper a bit more catchy if you try to say something like, okay, here is what let's say a given governor or a party manifesto or something like that says, and then you actually test whether the welfare or wages or something like that of local immigrants, whether they respond positively or negatively to the election of said representative. So I'm not being political here. I'm just curious whether this sort of analysis can be done. That's all.
Yeah, if I understood correctly, and your question, if this could be partially answered to your question, like I said, unemployment rate overall has been worsened for low-skilled immigrants after getting Democratic governor by a small margin. But like conditional on they were employed, the overall the wage level in real term has been enhanced. So that's why I tried to come up with the expected payouts concept, which could be simply the product of the probability of getting a job and getting paid. But here I would like to bring one more context in the U.S. labor market, specifically for the low-skilled immigrants. And especially about the low-skilled Hispanic immigrants, there are a significant share of population who are undocumented as well. And also for documented ones as well, those people are really like just binding to economic incentives. What I mean by is that many of them are just living by like bi-weekly paycheck by paycheck. So there is no reason for them to stay being unemployed and living in the US, especially among the unemployed, undocumented one. There's no reason. So that's why they're kind of more mobile. Even there is just small differences over the economic incentives or expected payouts over there. And like I'm not sure if there is any question about that, but I do know that Alexander and other friends are also interested in some sort of political economics and the migration, the cross section of the two. I would like to share this one as a kind of interesting sub-analysis. It is about low-skilled Hispanic foreign-born by citizenship and checking their migration pattern. So here in this, the first 3 columns about the citizens and last 3 columns about non-citizens. And I'm focusing on low-skilled Hispanic immigrants, the foreign-borns. And here, once again, it is non-citizens that really drives the overall migration pattern. And what I want to highlight in this slide is that, maybe someone may say that, Juno, I get that your point. It was quite okay. But it is quite interesting to see, Democratic Party says that they are like a party for immigrants, but it turns out that they are just losing the immigrants. What if what is going on about their kind of vote base or fan base? So I would like to say that if we just make it kind of fine-tuned statement, then it could be more like a Democratic Party could care about their voters or their likely voters. Like it is non-citizens that they not moving in or moving out from the democratic states. So they are losing some citizens, but not many. And I would like to leverage another paper in the literature, actually by my advisor and Professor Perry as well, that if there is a higher share of low-skilled immigrants, the Republican vote share margin is being increasing. In turn, losing low-skilled immigrants who are non-citizen, we're gonna decrease the Republican vote share. Then that will be unexpected good news for the Democratic Party in that state. So in that sense, there will be no such kind of big cost in terms of vote base or fan base or kind of political pressure for the Democratic Party in that state due to this prompt migration patterns as well. So I think that one is another very interesting sub-analysis that I found so far.